Hello, my beautiful creative souls, and welcome back for another podcast episode of the Leanne podcast. I'm just sitting here. It's mid-morning. Got my cold third cup of coffee. And I just wanted to have a little chat with you. I'm going to lean in, get cozy, intimate here, so you can hear me in the microphone. But I hope you all are doing so very well. And I wanted to come and speak to you with some musings from the liminal space. Now, I think I touched on the liminal space in my last episode, but I've gotten quite a few comments recently on posts that I'm making about being in the liminal space and like my liminal ingathering offering. Of those of you who are still kind of confused about what that is. So let's muse on that a little bit before we get into kind of the thoughts that I'm having and just the general chit chat that I wanted to share with you today. But basically, the liminal space is a space of transition. It's hard to explain because of its nature, but here we go. The liminal space you can kind of think of as the crossroads. So a point where you either have finished a journey or you're coming to the end of a journey. And before you've like really started the next one, or you've started the next one, but you haven't really kind of settled into it yet. Examples are kind of when you're in the middle of a move, right? So you've actually physically moved everything out of your house maybe, and maybe you've even moved it into your new house and you've put it away, but there's still that like weird adjustment where you're trying to reach for lights that used to be in your old place, or you have thoughts of like, oh, I need to do this, but that doesn't really apply anymore, or you just don't quite feel yourself yet, right? It doesn't feel like yours yet. It's not real. That's a liminal space. It's a space in between one thing and the next. It's transition. It's where all possibilities exist, which makes it difficult because you're almost everything and nothing at the same time. And I know that sounds really big and you're probably like, what? But when you are able to be in a liminal space and recognize this is a liminal space, that explanation will make perfect sense. Other liminal spaces are things like transitions between jobs, transitions between years, transitions between seasons. We all know that seasonal transition, especially at least for where I live, between winter and spring, where it's like winter has not left yet, but like I'm fully in spring mode. I'm anticipating spring. Like people want to be outside. All of the shops are full of like summer stuff already. And yet there's still snow on the ground and the earth is still technically sleeping, right? So it's this weird moment of like, I'm internally in one place and externally I'm in a different place. And I haven't quite figured out how to make everything sing in harmony yet. We can also think of the liminal space like a waiting room where, like I said, you're between one thing and the next. So you're not in the pre-period, but you're not in the post-period. You're like in the middle of it. But I feel that even that description doesn't quite do it justice because we feel this discomfort. Okay, let's transition a little bit into what the liminal space feels like. Because I'm talking a lot about like abstractly what it is. But what does it feel like to be in a liminal space? How do you know? It feels like everything and nothing at the same time. It can feel like an absolute effing roller coaster. You can be happy, ecstatic, grateful, inspired, passionate and then the next minute feel like you're having an identity crisis. You have no fucking idea what's going on. You don't know what to do. And you kind of just want to curl up in a ball and hide. And none of the ways to experience the liminal space are incorrect or wrong. You may feel more on one side of the spectrum than the other. But overall, it's an intense feeling of discomfort and like being a little bit lost. It's like knowing but not knowing. You're like, okay, I'm on this road, but like, where does it go? And do I even want to be on this road? Like, or you're at the crossroads, right? You're at a fork in the road and you aren't quite sure where you want to go next, but you know for sure you don't want to go back the way you came. But you've also been on a journey that's changed you, right? You've been on a journey that's changed you from the person who started that road initially that you just came from. And you need a little time to figure out who that person is and what they even want before you pick the road ahead. I feel like that was the most well put explanation that I've had thus far in the podcast. But I know a lot of it's abstract and I know it's hard to picture, but it's something that is felt. It's an experience that is felt and moved through. And once you recognize you're in the liminal space, it's easier, not because it's less uncomfortable, but because we have a lens through which to understand what's going on inside of us. And then we can begin to really have some grace with ourselves and be a little bit easier on ourselves and understand that this is the space we're in and have the tools needed to move forward within that space, right? So what do we do when we're in the discomfort of a liminal space? There's kind of 3 phases. There's the shadow work / reflection / healing phase, where we are reviewing kind of that road that happened, right? We're reviewing everything that happened before. We're taking stock of how we've grown. We're coming to an understanding of the lessons that have happened. But we're also looking at what we could have handled a little bit better and what we may have chosen to ignore, or karmic patterns that we may have repeated, or lessons that we didn't quite handle as well as we know we could have. And as a result of that, have separated ourselves from pieces of us, put things in shadow, right? Shadows are just things that we don't want to look at for a variety of reasons, but it usually comes from a sense of wanting to feel safe because we want to avoid discomfort or avoid having those rough conversations with ourselves or avoid maybe some negative self-talk that comes up when we think about certain events or things we haven't accomplished yet or XYZ, right? There's a million things that could be in shadow, but it's usually things that we shove in the dark because we're not equipped to deal with it. So when we come to the liminal space, some of that discomfort is from being faced with some of those things that we previously weren't ready to look at, but have come to a point where we either are ready to look at or we are in a place where the divine is no longer letting us ignore it, right? It's a part that needs to come up and come into the light and be recognized and be worked through before we can move forward, or in order for us to move forward along the highest path, like along the path of a soul-aligned life. So that's kind of the first phase of it. We reflect on where we've been, who we've become, everything we've done, and what is coming up in our shadow that we need to reintegrate back into love, into forgiveness, and into part of us. The second phase that we move into within the liminal space is a space of self, reinventing the self, but not from a space of action, but a space of exploration. And this can often feel like the messiest phase, especially after we take a look at where we've been, right? And who we've become and the shadows. We're faced with all of these things and we realize what we need to let go of. We go through the process of letting go of it. We go through the process of, doing all this work with the past self, all this energetic work for healing, which in phase 2 almost throws us into a sense of an identity crisis, but one that's very strangely layered because we are coming into it with the understanding of who we've become based on who we were. But there's a piece that feels like it's missing because we're still navigating who we're becoming and where that person who is becoming would like to go next. Let's talk a little bit about the next phase because I feel like this helps frame, again, a very abstract concept. So the third and final phase of this liminal space is the phase of choosing the path or constructing a vision, deciding where you'd like to go, right? So if you think of the crossroads, visualization again, we have the past, the path that you came off of, right? And that was the first phase, was us figuring out all the shit that had to do with that. Then you have the actual space in between, which is the liminal space, which is phase 2 of the unmolded self, if you will. And then we have the path forward, right? Which is stage 3 of choosing or coming to an understanding of, aligning with the resonance of where you'd like to go next. And where you're going informs who you're becoming. But who you're becoming is also informed by where you've been. You see why this second stage is so messy and uncomfortable and liminal, right? So there's even a liminal space within the liminal space. We're getting very meta here. But as we're navigating the second phase, it's important for us to be gentle with ourselves and to balance these two things, right? We don't want to jump right to stage 3 by just saying, okay, this is who I'm becoming, this is where I'm going, laying out a whole 5-year plan and just running with it. Because oftentimes when we do that and we rush forward too quickly, we end up kind of choosing maybe not the wrong path, but a path that maybe wasn't as aligned with the highest possibility, or the path that wasn't the best for where we actually truly desire to go. But it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because we're also in this space before we actually choose of not knowing exactly where that is. So how do we navigate the liminal within the liminal? Here's like the ultimate fucking question, right? How do we begin to navigate a space that requires us to be in limbo? How do we begin to constructively work with that limbo in order to prepare ourselves and align with the path that we actually want to move forward on. Now, I'd like to preface any of these tips by saying this is not a one-size-fits-all kind of talk. I'm going to share a couple things. There's a million different ways you can approach something like this. It's going to be unique to everybody's situation. Disclaimer, because I have to, I'm not a licensed professional of any kind. Please do not take this as psychological, medical, legal, financial, etc., advice. Consult with your medical professionals and appropriately licensed peoples before making life-altering decisions, etc. Be a responsible human, please and thank you. So how the fuck do we navigate this, Leanne? If you're feeling that way, I'm right there with you. Let me just share a little bit about my story before we get into the tips, actually, because I feel that if you are in this space, it can feel very lonely and confusing, and having some encouragement from someone who understands the big picture but is also going through it as well can be helpful. Because here's the funny thing about walking a spiritual path. When we are spiritually aware and we begin to understand these larger concepts and the concepts of the universe, right? We know, whether that be on an intuitive level or a conscious level or a subconscious level, the bigger picture of things, right? We know that we're in a state of change. We know that we need to lean into our spiritual practice. We know that we're going to align with our highest path, that we're going to manifest everything we want, that we're going to figure it out, and that sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable, and we need to trust, and we need to blah, 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 take care of ourselves, etc., right? We know all of these things, but knowing them does not stop us from having the human experience of going through the thing. Now, having the bigger picture lens can help us navigate it, right? Understanding it, teaching what I'm teaching you today, giving you these tools, right? These are all to help you navigate this if you are moving or when you move through a liminal space. But it does not prevent or remove you from having these experiences, because they are an essential part of this cycle, right? We can't have a death and rebirth cycle without having death and rebirth, which is another great example of a liminal space. Side note. We have death, then we have nothing, then we have rebirth. The nothing in between is the liminal space, right? For this reason, we also can view the liminal space as where everything unseen exists. So oftentimes when people refer to the liminal space, they're also referring to the other world, to the world we cannot see, to spirits and deities and dimensions and all these other things. They're in the liminal space, the space of no thing, or the thing that we cannot see yet. That's not so much what I'm talking about here, but I did just come up and I wanted to share that with you. So hopefully by now you're used to my cyclical conversations and little bunny trails, but if not, hello. My name is Leanne. This is how things go. We hop from one thing to another and then circle back, and hopefully at the end we end up with an entire conversation. Sip of coffee. So right now, I am more firmly in that liminal space than I think I have ever been before. And I'm very thankful that this particular liminal experience that I'm having was not the first time that I entered into a liminal space with the awareness of what was happening, because I don't think that I would be equipped for navigating the intensity of what I am holding in my experience at the moment. Without sharing too much and trying to put the intangible into words, I am going through a multi-layered identity shedding and rebirth cycle. I have been going through this experience for 2 years now, roughly. And each time I think I've figured it out, it's like a little mini death and rebirth cycle, right? And moving through that, I've come to the point where I thought I figured it all out. I thought once I claimed this new identity, once I was like, yes, okay, I receive it, I get it, I'm stepping into it, we're moving there, that it would be like smooth sailing. And in this liminal space of this multi-layered identity, death and rebirth cycle, I'm now at the point where I think is the deepest part of the liminal space, where, like I was talking about before, I have done a lot of shadow work. I understand where I've been. I have reflected on how that has built up into where I am now. I've come to an understanding of how all of those things are going together, and I am more self-assured of who I am and what that means moving forward than I ever have been before. The irony of that is, even with that knowing, because I am no longer the entirety of who I was before, but I'm not yet who I'm becoming, I can't even say lost. Like, I can't even say I feel insanely lost, because I know where I'm going. But I feel lost as to who I am in this moment, when pieces from the past don't fit anymore. And that's a really strange thing to navigate. Now, I want to say I'm okay. Like, don't worry about me. I'm okay. But I wanted to share that with you in the hopes that A, it made sense, and B, to share that this is multi-layered and multifaceted and different for everybody. And that even as you think you are done your death and rebirth cycle of something, there's always a deeper layer. And each little mini layer that we go through before we get to that big mama jamma, which is what I'm feeling right now, is 100% necessary and exactly where you need to be right now. And to not expect that your rebirth cycle will be the end all be all. So that brings us to our original thing that we were going to talk about, right? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Here's what we do. We drink coffee. We get comfortable with not knowing. And if you've made it to the Mama Jamma experience that I'm talking about, I'm hoping you found this video before then, but if you've made it to the Mama Jamma experience, it's such a weird saying, Mama Jamma. Where does that even come from? I should probably look these things up before I just start saying things. But anyway. Editing Leanne coming in here for a minute. So I looked up Mama Jamma, and it turns out it is a song from the 80s by an R&B singer, Carl Carlton, and he sang a song, She's a Bad Mama Jamma. And the song's basically about a good-looking woman who is confident, who he is attracted to. In a nutshell, you know, she's beautiful, she's got a great figure. So I want to acknowledge that I'm using this term, and while it does not directly apply, I feel that it ironically does relate, because in this stage is when confidence kind of enters in, and even if you don't identify as female, there is this piece about being in this deep liminal transformation where you come to an understanding of exactly who you are and have that confidence to kind of move forward in that self-assured way. And I feel like that very does much ripple out into the ways that other people perceive you. So maybe that's just my, stretch of trying to make sense of why this was the term that came to my brain that I continued to use. But I did want to hop in here, clarify that, and just acknowledge that the term's technically not correct. It's slang and may not have been totally appropriate for what I was trying to articulate. But yes, back to other Leanne. All the moments leading up to this have required some level of discomfort, right? Deciding that you're going to change your life, or having divine interference change your life, for the better always, but it doesn't always seem like that in the moment, right? Especially when we get those tower moments. It requires us to be uncomfortable, and we have to learn how to be okay with that discomfort. It requires a level of trust in who we are and where we're going in order for us to continue on. So as we navigate this space, there's an invitation for us to figure out what it is that we truly believe. And this may be different than what we have believed in the past. And leaning into these new beliefs is going to help us root deeper into who we are now, which will help us as we move forward. So getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is advice number one. It's never easy. It's never actually comfortable. But with that is a recognition that that is part of the process, that the discomfort is not going to kill you, but it will ultimately be your ally, and we have to see the discomfort somewhat as our ally, as our teacher, as our indicator. It's something to not be feared and to run away from, but rather to allow it to sit in the room with us and to figure out how to move anyway, to not let it paralyze us or make us run back the other direction. Okay. Tip number 2, find your truth. And that is a big task, right? We're not just going to take a journal prompt, say, this is what I believe, and be done with it. There's a lot to unpack. And when we ask, what do you believe, right? What do you believe? What is your truth? What do you know? I mean, you got to give me a fucking category, right? Like, what do I know about plants? What do I know about animals? What do I know about ghosts? What do I know about myself? Like, there could be a million things, right? That are truth that we understand, that we know, that we believe. And these things aren't always set in stone, because the more that we learn, the more we grow, the more we evolve, the more that these things change based on our current understanding of things, right? So how do we narrow that down? That's something that only you can figure out in this moment. And I know that sucks as an answer, but it's the truth, right? Because it's going to be so dependent on what you are going through right now and what is involved with that. And what are you sensing is coming down the road ahead, which is tip number 3. We'll get there in a second. So while I can't tell you what beliefs, what truths to explore, here's what I can say. Keep an open mind and an open heart and listen. Listening is the most important part in the liminal space. You may find as you're in this liminal space, and this is probably even tip number 4, so we're just going to run them all together because they all connect. When we're in this liminal space, we may find that we really pull away from things that we were previously connected to and consuming. You may find you don't want to watch the same shows, you don't want to watch the same people on YouTube, you don't want to listen to the same podcasts, you don't want to read the same books, and you may find that you don't want to do any of that at all. And if you're like me and learning and digesting new perspectives and new information is part of your identity, this can be a really uncomfortable place to be in. But the reason that this happens is because the liminal space asks us to be in a place of silence. Not silence of the self, but silence of everything else, so that we can hear ourselves. And when we really tap into the pulse of our soul essence, the actual person who lives in here, even if we're in a moment of like that identity shift where we're not quite sure, right? We don't know what all the truths are right now. We can still be still and connect to the essence of that. And through that, we begin to hear where we're being called to. Which moves us into the next tip that I was talking about, right? Which is feeling into where you're going next. Now, as I talked about earlier, this isn't a point where we're going to decide and then move into that, avenue of movement, because that's phase 3, right? But as we move through the liminal, inside the liminal, right, the stage 2 of the self, there is little messages. There are little messages that come through. There are pulls and ideas and indications, and they're meant to be there for us to explore and try on. It's like shopping for clothes. regardless of whether you enjoy the experience or not, right? Oftentimes when we're shopping for clothes in an actual store, maybe even online, we put lots of different things into our cart, especially if we hit that clearance rack, right? We're like, ooh, I gotta try that on, I gotta try that on. And you end up with a whole variety of like different things that you may not have picked before just because, you know, they're there. And you're like, oh, do I like that? I kind of like it. I should probably try it on to see if it fits right, if the color matches with my skin, if it feels good. Do I like the fabric? Do I like the way it hangs on my body? Will I actually wear it anywhere once I get it on, right? We don't know any of those things until we actually try the piece of clothing on. So what we're doing in this phase, right, is we're collecting things off the rack and we're trying them on. And we're not committing yet, right? We're just playing. We're exploring. We're seeing how it fits. Do we like the fabric, right? All those things I just talked about. As we're in this space, right? I really shared those tips all together, but that's because they're all kind of intertwined, right? We are getting comfortable or learning to be comfortable with the discomfort, right? We're allowing it to be hard. We're allowing it to be uncomfortable. Once we recognize that it's going to be uncomfortable, then we get to move into silence, stillness, listening, receiving, trying on, exploring, and recognizing or developing or fleshing out what our truth is. What do we believe? What feels good to us? And this truth thread is going to run throughout all of those experiences. And the shadow work that we talked about in phase 1 too might also kind of peek its head in here as we're exploring the truth of who we are right now. But in order to know what it is that we need to percolate on in terms of our truth is going to come up through the phase of trying on, of exploring. So while this second phase, right, I really built it up. It's like, this is the hardest part. This is the most uncomfortable part. And part of that might be because that is the stage I'm in right now. And I'm like, this fucking sucks. But the way that we navigate it is by putting that out there in the room, right? Sitting it down and saying, look, I see you. I know you're here. I know the change is here and you fucking suck. Like, it's hard. And allowing that to just be there and to recognize that. And then to say, okay, I'm now willing to see the magic within the heart, to see the play that gets to happen, to allow this to be messy and chaotic and uncomfortable and explore where I'm being called to go, what ideas are coming up, what is and isn't for me anymore, and feel into, in that dressing room of life, where I would like to go next. Like, what do I actually want to walk away from this door with, right? Because if we go back to the dressing room example, once we leave the store with that piece of clothing, that is part of our new identity, right? That is now part of what we're going to be dressing ourselves in and putting ourselves out into the world, clothed in, and presenting ourselves forward with. These pieces of clothing are meant to represent where we are in our life right now and different things we're exploring, right? So once the try-on period is done and you've actually like committed to a piece, right? It may not be forever, right? That piece of clothing probably won't last forever. Eventually it's going to wear out. Maybe you change, you get bigger or smaller, it doesn't fit anymore. Maybe it shrinks in the wash. Maybe you just decide that, you know what, that was fun for a little bit, but I'm over it right now. Or it's a seasonal piece and you're only going to wear it during certain times of the year, right? We're talking about clothes, but we're also talking about your identity. And whatever you're moving through as your liminal space, even if it's not technically your personal identity, no matter what change we go through, there is a piece of us tied to that, right? Whether that be your career, your job, your relationships, your house, your hobbies, your just internal whatever. We're always connected to that. So this period of trying on, of exploring, of deciding, yes, this is me, no, this isn't me, and not being apologetic about something not being for us or feeling bad if it's not for us anymore, is what this phase is all about. It's all about connecting with your absolute truth, so that when you walk out of that store with those brand new pieces, that you can confidently move forward with them for however long or short that they're going to be with you, right? And then you move into stage 3, and stage 3 is usually very simple. It's kind of that coming out of the liminal space where you now understand who you were, where you've been, where you're going, and now you get to go. Like, this is where I've been. This is what happened to me. This is who I am. This is my truth. This is where I want to go. This is where I'm being called to go. And this is where we're fucking going. And even if I don't know how to get there yet, I know what the destination feels like because I've tried it on, because I've taken time to explore it, because I've worked with who it is that I am at my core to understand what path I need to take forward, even if I don't see all the details, right? Because we can never 100% say like, okay, I'm going to go here. I have to do step A, B, and C. It's going to equal D. I almost said C. I'm like, but I already said that. So it's a good thing this isn't a alphabet lesson. But, you know, A plus B plus C equals D. Done, dusted, the end. Life's not like that, right? We all know that. Let's, before we go, pull a card for anybody in the liminal space right now, feeling like they might be entering a liminal space, because I feel like that would be supportive, right? So we're going to pull a card from the Ocean's Dreams, a Mystic Oracle by Danielle Noel. I had to look at it because I will butcher the name. To me, this is the Ocean Oracle. But, so, taking a moment, connecting in with that essence that we talked about. So I invite you to join me wherever you are. If you're driving and listening to this, please do not close your eyes, but just take a moment. Feel where you are. Feel that you're a human and a magical soul inside of a body on this physical earth plane, connected to Mother Earth by the gravity that pulls you towards her, connected to the divine, to the sky above you, all the magic that lives on the other side, the great cosmos, the one source that we all come from. And as you breathe a little deeper and bring the earth and the sky into your awareness, I want you to draw attention to your heart space. This is the space where you live. where the earth and the sky energy meet with your source energy, with the you that is the youest you that flows through your veins, the you that boils with anger, that spills over with joy, that ignites with passion, that weeps with sorrow. That you lives right here all the time in all of your multifacets and layers. Taking a deep breath, recognizing your wholeness, sending some love and some gratitude to yourself for being you. Thank you for being you. And from this awareness, we're going to pull a card. You're welcome to flutter your eyes open or keep them closed if you prefer to receive the message from that way. Asking our guardians, guides, allies, healed ancestors to deliver us a message of guidance and encouragement for anybody that's in or entering into this liminal space that we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes. And we have the shapeshifter. All right, we're going to read the message from the shapeshifter. But I feel like this is so perfect. So we think about the shapeshifter in general, because I always like to think about this, right? Before we dive into what someone else has to say about it, let's like connect into our own intuitive hearing, right? In our intuitive messages, in our own understanding of what this means for us in our experience. So actually, before I muse on it, because I have all kinds of things to say about the shapeshifter and the octopuses on this beautiful card, take a moment for yourself. What does shapeshifter mean to you? Do you resonate with shape shifting? Is it something that you find kind of off-putting, right? Just think about your own intuitive messages that are coming through, things that made you think of, your initial reaction to that. If you are in a space where you're listening to this and you have your journal or your phone nearby, again, as long as you're not driving or operating any kind of other machinery, take a moment to just write that down for yourself. And I'll put a picture up on the screen for you, in case you want to look at it while you do that. So to me, the shapeshifter is something I've always really identified with because maybe as a Scorpio, I'm always someone who is reinventing myself and putting different aspects of myself forward depending on the situation. Not because I don't know who I am or because I'm, trying to please people around me, but because I'm so multifaceted that there are certain pieces of me that are more appropriate for certain spaces than others, right? Like this conversation we're having right now is perfectly appropriate for this space, but if I'm having dinner with my in-laws, I'm not just going to start talking about the liminal space, right? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to step into my priestess role. I'm going to be the daughter-in-law, I think that's what it is, right? And, speak with them about what's going on with them or jump in about my thoughts on whatever conversation they're having, etc., etc. I'm still embodying, that spiritual essence within myself, but it's not presenting forward, right? So that's neither here nor there, I guess, but that's a little bit about shape-shifting, right? It's understanding your core identity and which pieces of it desire to come forward in which scenarios. But it also requires a certain level of discernment of this is me and this is someone else. So I feel that this card is asking us to remember in the liminal space, again, with that truth finding, and really just ask the question, right? Am I defaulting to this because this is my truth? Or am I defaulting to this because this is just something I've always taken on as my truth, but it really doesn't belong to me, or it doesn't belong to me anymore? And with that as well, I am thinking of the octopus or the octopi on this particular card. And I love octopuses. They're so cool. They're some of the most intelligent creatures. They have the ability to literally change the color of their skin to look like their surroundings in a blink of an eye. They will outsmart and outmaneuver you, and they can grow their little pieces back and they have an ability to mold themselves into like the smallest spot to like pop out. Like they can go through a crack and just like somehow fit out to the other side. It's amazing. And I feel that with the liminal space, there is this kind of sense of stretching and being molded and squeezing and pressure and just different quantities of you coming to the surface. Like sometimes we feel really like crunched in and small, and sometimes we're like, whoa, here I am, baby. And we get to be all of those things at the same time. So let's read the guidebook description and see what wisdom Danielle Noel has to share with us. Okay, so keywords for shapeshifter: adaptability, versatility, dexterity, selflessness, divine intelligence, self-awareness, and regeneration. Affirmation: I move with grace and ease. I am able to shift my pace at any time. I am always transforming and evolving, which goes beautifully. Although this card comes with the title Shapeshifter, it does not denote a trickster energy. This card highlights the ability to make changes when necessary, as you are able to resist fear and go with the flow. This card also encourages you to embrace new experiences that present themselves, especially when they reinforce what your intuition is telling you. These opportunities may require you to multitask, but do not fret. You are more than capable of handling the situations at hand. This card also highlights your creative skills and dexterity, which points to gifts in the arts that are waiting to be explored. Complex problem solving may be necessary, but you are able to adapt and rise to the occasion. Trust in your sensitive nature to help you maneuver forward. Listen to the power of your higher self, and believe in your deeper spiritual faculties to help guide you at every twist and turn. I feel like that was such a beautiful way of ending this talk today. Thank you so much to the guides and spirits and healed ancestors that presented us with that beautiful kind of wrap up to today's topic. I hope that if you were confused about what the liminal space was, that this helped create some clarity rather than confusion. And that if you are in the liminal space, that this helped you feel a little more grounded and a little more seen and a little more prepared and able to understand what you're moving through, how it's moving, and how you can more delicately embrace what is going on for you as you move through this space. If you are looking for support during a liminal time, I will leave some resources linked below for you to check out if you feel that you would like to explore those. And with all that being said, sending you so much love, and I will see you guys in the next video / podcast. Take care, guys. Bye.